Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen Carpenter. With me is my partner, co host, and father, Brandon. This week we discussed the second part of a two-part series involving wildlife and our ranch. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. Facebook, like, comment, and share. And on all platforms, spread the word. Enjoy the show.
Now, as you recall, the other thing that brings me to that light is when we were all in Yellowstone Park one time, and you know how I am. Where I go, I don't care if I'm on the East Coast. I got a hat and boots. I mean, this is the way I am, And we walk up to the Great Falls of the Yellowstone. As we're up there, there's a table there
Not
with
Great Falls, the Grand Canyon of the
or
Yellowstone.
Grand Canyon Yellowstone. Sorry, yeah, I was thinking the other, but saying one
Yeah,
thing. So
gotcha.
yeah, it happens. And walking past this table, and these people, you could smell them. And my sniffer doesn't work very well, but I could smell these people. They smell like smoke. Okay, but they were wearing, Patagucci leather wear. I mean, they're just an eclectic group. And you know what? I'm just there with my kids and my wife and my in-laws, and we just want to see some sights of Yellowstone because we're close. It's kind of a nice getaway for a couple of days. And this guy looked at me and just kind of give me this look and kind of nodded at me. I just nodded back and kept walking. Got no beef with him. I got better things to do. On the way back, as if I think you'll recall, a
Mhm.
guy stepped out, and I'm 6'1" and about 230 pounds. I'm not small, and this guy was enormous, towering over the top. I mean, the guy had to have been 6'5", 6'6", and probably pushing 300. He wanted a confrontation. And if you recall that, and he stopped and he says, "What do you think about this?" I mean, he's part of this buffalo campaign of all the buffalo in the park should be left alone because they're, taking some out and they're thinning them out. They're creating some areas of slaughter when they come off of the park.
Yeah,
All kinds
they
of
what
different
they
issues to
do
try to
is
manage it.
now they allow essentially like a normal migration, and when they migrate outside the park, there's a with the fish wildlife in parks they allow certain tags per year to you can go down and get your buffalo. It's a super interesting hunt because all you do is you look at something that doesn't move and you shoot it because they're it's buffalo, but
Yeah, well, and their migration patterns have changed too. They're not the
right.
old normal migration. If you talk to some of the old guys in there, they said, "Oh, this is completely different."
Yeah, it is
But this
different, but
guy,
that's what I'm saying. Like I'm just explaining like
yeah,
that's how it works now because again, buffalo hunts aren't interesting at all. I said that
no,
with sarcasm, but the thing is it's a way to reduce the numbers to mitigate, to try and take care of the ground because ecological what is really the purpose of the park? It's to preserve the land for future generations. Is really what it was sold as and it should be. But if you continue to grow those herds like we're talking about and you just let it happen, it won't be preserved for future generations. It will be destroyed.
well, and that's what he did. He saw what I represented to him was ranching agriculture,
Yeah.
and he wanted to pick a fight. And he got in my face, and so I thought, you know what? You want to have a fight with somebody? Let's see just how educated you are. And so I started talking about, he wanted to say he kept mentioning how many buffalo they had and how many it would hold, how many acres the park was. And I said, okay, let's talk about that. That's ecology 101.
Yeah.
And I said, look at this hillside over there. Is this part counted? And it was the entire canyon wall of the park. And I said,
Where it's rock, there's no growth,
rock.
nothing. Yep.
It's yeah, it was all slide rock, and you got a couple of miles, several square miles there of this unusable. You can't even get on it ground. I said, is that
And same
is
with
that
geysers,
part of the
because
park?
if anybody's seen
Yeah,
the geysers, there's no dirt.
no,
There's only
there's
dirt. Sorry,
only dirt. Yeah,
there's no grass and there's hot water underneath. There's places the buffalo know not to walk because they'll
right.
fall through and freaking die.
Well, and there's nothing there for them to graze on, to
Right.
forage on. So yeah, there's life there. There's lots of microbial life. There's all kinds of stuff. I'm not saying there isn't something there, but to support a buffalo, no.
Right.
And I said, are does that acreage count in the entire acreage that you're talking about that's in the park, so many square miles? Well, yeah. I said, how many buffalo can utilize that? And he just looked
Zero.
at me, and he was kind of loud, obnoxious, and pretty soon people were gathering around and listening to this, and you could tell he was getting more and more frustrated because I was bringing up arguments that were more science based, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
let's take your numbers. No management is not management. And I said, you
Correct.
want to talk about where the best place for these buffalo are is the Lamar Valley. Now go take a look at your grasses there. Go look at the weeds that are there. How much bare ground is there? How trampled is that ground? That is not management. How come those animals move? And he was getting so frustrated, and pretty soon I'd say something, and people going, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, oh my God, he was getting bad. Of course, your mother's like, oh, I'm leaving. So she goes and sits in the car. I think you guys all got tired of this because,
Yeah.
the guy would not let it go. And of course, I'm not going to let it go until I
Of
can
course
thoroughly
not. Why would
pound
you?
him into the ground. you know, Eh, just showing just how it isn't going to change him, though. That's the point. I
And
guess
that's
where I'm
why I
getting to.
leave, because I
Yeah,
know when there's a lost cause, so to speak, because I can talk all day. I can sit here and we can talk about this. We can have people who disagree and we can talk about it, but it's much like politics in a sense. No matter
it is politics. That is
what,
part of their
well,
politics.
it is, but what you're saying is also not really politics. It's science-based ecological understanding. And when you're not willing to listen to the science and the things that have been learned, you
Right.
I can't, there's no point in this continuing this conversation, because if we're going to talk about something and you're not going to listen to the legitimate facts that I understand and I know and I see in front of me, that are all based off of scientific study and going out and getting results and seeing, okay, what does the ground actually tell us? What has the past told us? Because that's another thing too. What have we done right and what have we done wrong? You're going to learn a lot more from doing stuff wrong. And when you're not listening to any of the stuff that I'm looking at and saying this makes sense to the direction I'm going, and the 90% of the population says the same, and again, it's context. You're looking at overall ground usage. You can't use it towards that animal because it doesn't support them. I can't, we just, it's not worth me continuing to talk to
Right.
you when you're not going to listen to what I have to say,
Well,
no
but
matter how much fact or logic I provide to you.
that's right. But consensus is not science. and
No.
that's part of where we've gone with this is people, because science has been the one definitive thing that was about the scientific method. And can you repeat this? Do you have a hypothesis? The whole process. And then data gathering. Well, you can gather that data, and this is where it breaks down. You can either exclude data or you can
Yes.
extrapolate data, and now you're not dealing with science. Now you are using science as a argument to further something that is an idea, not a hypothesis that is provable. There's a big difference there. And you talk about follow the science, follow the science. Okay, whose science? So
And that's
science
accurate
has
too.
been
Just like
hijacked and
statistics.
bastardized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what'd your grandpa say about statistics? I brought that up in a in a morning meeting one time, and I had a female boss that ran the place.
I'll be right back. Keep going, monologue. I'll listen.
Oh, monologue time. All right. And she says, or somebody said something about statistically, and I was running the show at the time. I was the shift superintendent temporarily, or filling in. That was kind of my role. And she was sitting there, and somebody said something about statistically this, and I was like, yeah, they were coming at it from an engineering perspective instead of an operational perspective, which they really weren't on from, of course, my perspective, or our perspective from the process. And I said, it's kind of like my old man says about statistics. And everybody kind of turned, and because I hadn't said anything, and my voice when I spoke, they kind of turned and overwhelmed the room, unfortunately. And I said, my old man says statistics are like a bikini. And they, the looks on some of their faces, some were going, oh God, don't go here. Others were saying, oh, tell me more. And the boss was looking at me with this eye, and she was a interesting individual. And I said, the old man says statistics are like a bikini. What they reveal is interesting, but what they conceal is vital.
Mm-hmm.
And it's absolutely true. And so that's why we have been using, or I say we, because we could do it too, our side of the argument, or any side of any argument, doesn't matter what it is. And you say, well, this is science, this is what it tells me. No, you
Right.
have to think critically beyond people's BS and what they are trying to push as an agenda. And that's where this gets to. But you're right. I'd have been better off walking away from this guy and just say, forget it. But by the time I was done talking to him, there must have been 50 people crowded around there listening to this conversation, at least 50. And I don't think he had any support because what I was talking about was exactly what he was trying to get everybody to statistically or emotionally buy into, which was not true. It was false. There were lots of false premises there, and I was pointing them out. And of course, your grandpa came back to I think you guys were all in the vehicle, and your grandpa come back to kind of like, hey, let's get out of here, and was listening to it. And then pretty soon he'd start asking some questions because he was just stirring the pot.
He's famous
Not,
for that.
yeah, your mother's dad, I might add, not my dad. So that was that
No,
was kind of funny, but
your dad would have just stayed there, and you two would have been going back and forth with him. But
well, at that point, we might have went back to back and went dukes with him, and the old man gets mad enough. Oh
but
God.
moving
Anyhow,
on though, because we're talking about wildlife impact. Um, I think I wasn't gonna go down the predator chain, but this is, I think, to make the point a little better. Um, I don't know where this fella came from, nor do I really care. But a lot of the times, I would say that this mentality comes from people who, like we were talking about, they're not familiar with the area or they don't understand. If you're in the Ohio Valley, you would say, hey, this amount of acreage, I can get this whatever product to grow. That's not the same as Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. So you have to understand the context of the region. That's the same for the animals as well. So, for example, you look at places like the Northeast United States and then California. Their coyote populations have boomed, and they're suddenly going, well, why are all these coyotes here? Well, guess what happened? You didn't want to deep what's the word? Depredatize? What am I trying to think?
well, just control the population
Right.
through predator control of one form or another.
Right. And so the lack of that has resulted in essentially vermin running throughout your cities. And now they're like, well, why are my cats missing? Well, because a coyote came through and he found
They're
one and he took advantage.
tasty.
Yeah. And so there's the context of the region and the location. And so what I'm trying to say for this particular example is there are a lot of ranches in maybe Idaho and western Montana that they have issues with bears, especially if you're a sheep herder and whatnot. They'll ravage a sheep herd because they can. And there's there's an understanding that the bear population has also increased recently, and that's why the grizzly bear is coming off the endangered species list. And yes, there's politics behind that too, but that's why the movement
Yeah.
is going toward, hey, they're going to get delisted because there's just so many of them. But I wouldn't tell, because we don't have a bear issue where we are at. I would never look over to a guy in Dillon, Montana, and say, just suck it up. You don't have to deal like what. It's just
Right.
a bear. Get over it. That's
Well,
where I come from.
or in
Sorry.
Shoto, Montana,
Right.
where you have the last real prairie habitat for the grizzly bear. And the grizzly bear was a prairie animal. Ask Lewis and Clark. Lewis dang near got 8 at the Great Falls in the Missouri,
Or Hugh
which is
Glass.
currently Great Falls.
I
Hugh
mean,
Glass,
people,
absolutely.
and let me throw this out there. Hollywood messed up the story of Hugh Glass with Revenant. It
Yeah.
was not the wintertime, it was the summertime, which I would argue was even worse because of the situation he was in. He didn't
Yep.
have a kid. He did hunt the guy down, never killed him. It was a horrible
Only
story.
because the cowardly bastard joined the military and they wouldn't let him kill
The U.S. government. Yeah.
a U.S. government. Yeah.
Yeah, but the story that Leonardo DiCaprio did, which was not his best depiction of anything. I think he could have gotten an Oscar for multiple other things, but well, whatever. The story, the movie Revenant was great. I loved it. I really did. Not the story that is accurate, and that's why I hate it, because
The real story would have been a way better story.
oh, so much better. If you are interested at all, look up Hugh Glass. And what
What a
happened was
tough man.
he was near, I think, near Fort Mandan in North Dakota, and he was in present day almost eastern Montana, but he was still on the western edge of North Dakota. He got attacked by a grizzly bear, and then he survived and literally drug himself and floated down the river to get to the nearest fort, and he
Well,
survived.
and the part of that where Fitzpatrick was the other trapper's name, and a young kid named Jim Bridger, and everybody knows who Jim Bridger is or should,
Yeah.
especially in this part of the country. We're told to stay with him, and when he dies, go ahead and bury him. Well, they got scared because the Arikara Indians were close, or they called them Rees,
And they're
the
also
Ree Indians.
feisty.
Oh yeah, and so they said, you know what, he's going to die. He's unconscious or in and out of conscious, and he just wouldn't die. The dude would not die,
It's because he's
and he
tough.
was tore up badly. Couldn't even. I mean, he couldn't move. So they left him. He crawled 250 miles, literally
Yeah.
crawled, and made it to, was it Fort Lincoln, Nebraska?
I don't remember. No, not Nebraska. It wasn't that far. I think it was like Fort Mandan or something.
It might have been, man. Anyway, but it was like just right at 250 miles. A man crawled and survived. Found a buffalo laying carcass on the and laid on that thing for several days, eating on a rotten, buffalo
Yeah.
carcass. I mean, this guy was incredible. Yeah. So do your research. Look at what Hugh Glass did as a trapper.
But the point is,
Incredible.
why did he come into that situation? Because he was on the plains where the
Yes.
grizzly bear was.
Yes.
That's what it was. The grizzlies were not mountain creatures, just like the
No.
elk and the buffalo weren't. You find the buffalo in Yellowstone National Park and in the mountains because that's where they're at now. They were never originally there. They were on the plains. Same with the bighorn ram. You
But
look
they're
at
also
bighorn
in the.
sheep, they were on the
Yep.
plains as well.
Yes. Lewis and Clark talked about right at just west of Billings at Park City. There's some cliffs, and in the journal, Clark talks about they were shooting bighorn sheep at the top of those cliffs from the river. That is not traditionally what we
Mm-mm.
think of as bighorn sheep area.
Nah.
The mountains were essentially sterile or hard to live on, and even the buffalo in the park are along the riparian areas and along the rivers and the flats. My point where I was going to get to this was we have a lot of these animals on the western front Shoto area, and as you say, Dillon, where they're constantly dealing with grizzly bears. The 1972 Endangered Species Act did what it was supposed to do. Remarkable thing. Brought back bald eagle. I never saw a bald eagle till I was about 11 or 12 years old. And maybe not, maybe 10. Anyway, and I think
And
we've
we see
talked
them all
about
the
that
time now when I come home.
all the time.
Yeah.
All the time we see bald eagles. Great
And golden eagles.
story of, yeah, golden eagles. Great stories of recovery. The grizzly bear has got to be one of pardon me, the greatest recovery stories.
Right.
Fact is, it's so good, we got so damn many of them. They're moving back down into the plains area,
Right.
and that is the issue. So instead of embracing that, hey, we did this, we turned this around in 50 years. We've got too many bears now. They want to keep using that as, oh, they're still in danger because they don't understand, again, how the lifestyle of this animal works. Um, they're essentially, lone animals. And look at and your point to coyotes, mountain lions. Coyotes are a little less dangerous overall. You have some rabbit issues, and
Right.
they're brave. The real issue in California is the mountain lion issue. They have so many mountain lions there, and they can't do a thing with them. And mountain lions are true predators. I think they are the most efficient predator killer on the North American continent.
Well, and
I've
why
seen video of a mountain lion taking down a 5-point bull elk in 30, 40 seconds.
yeah, that's crazy.
Incredible.
But
Yeah.
the reason being, why does California have this issue? It's the same reason they have the wildfires that they do now. They do
No
not.
management.
It's the mentality that I disagree with. This is typically from those of our brothers and sisters on the left of the aisle. The idea is typically, I'm going to save the earth by not doing anything. And I don't think that's the answer. And that's why you have the fires and now the mountain lion issues in California that you're referring to, because we've just simply said you can't do anything. So the management is, we do nothing, which is no logging or clearing of forests, like undergrowth, not letting fires get managed while they burn, like let them burn in a managed style. And then, okay, you can't hunt mountain lions whatsoever. So then what happens? You get, same with the bears in our area, you get a bunch of bears. And I think you're right. You have an opportunity to say, yes, we've done such a great job. Now we can start to manage. But it comes back to, especially with grizzly bears, I think bears are one of the coolest things in the world If
Mhm.
you've ever gotten to sit down and watch a bear play, it's hilarious. It's the cutest and cuddliest thing, but then you also have to realize, oh, this is a killing machine. It can come and get you whenever it chooses because it can run 30 miles an hour and it's just
Can outrun a horse.
yeah, and it's just massive and it's just huge. It's so cool. But then uh we've mythicized the grizzly bear because it's also the epitome of the American frontier. And why would we get rid of that? I think it much like the horse and the buffalo, the grizzly bears have also been mythicized to that point where we can't touch them because they're a godlike creature on North America.
Well, think about what our place would look like if we turned the stallions loose with the mares and the bulls with the cows and just turned them loose and did not take any of the colts or calves off of these animals. How fast would that decimate the ground that we have that sustains them now? I
Right.
mean, turn
It'd
that
do a
around
lot.
and put that on. Oh, yeah, like you say, 1 year, 2 years, they wouldn't have anything to eat.
I would say it would
And
probably sustain the herd for 1 2 years, but then after that, because you've gotten so many animals over that course of time, only and Braden would have a much better description of what would happen because of his background with the range management. But I would guess it would turn into dirt and
yeah,
weeds, and
yep,
then they're not going to be able to. You can't survive off of weeds, so all that they're going to do is they're just going to starve to death.
not that species. Yeah, because it's there are some things that are tolerable, just like we said, like the antelope in the wintertime browsing on sagebrush. That's what they do. So that's good. I've got no issue with that. And we tolerate a lot of that. So it's about coexisting with them. And I hate that word because that also is thrown out there as a political term, but it really is. It's about having a relationship with these animals and our domestic animals in order to be able to tolerate them enough. And we don't run them off. We don't shoot them. The predators is a little different. Uh, well, yeah, your brother Braden and I had a real moral dilemma here not too long ago as we're going up the road. We saw a coyote hunting in a prairie dog town, and he's like, "Oh, let's get down." Went, "Oh, wait a minute. If we kill the coyote, he's going to not take out the prairie dogs."
Yeah.
Boy, that is a moral dilemma. What do we do? Do we shoot the coyote and stop that, or do we let him go and see if we can get some more prairie dogs? So there's a balance there too. So, and you said everything's got a purpose. It's whether or not they're chewing on what you want to
Right.
try to do as a living or to sustain what we got going on.
Well, prairie dogs is a good one into what we were thinking about talking about anyway. We so I put down prairie dogs, badgers, weasels, and potentially wolverines. We'll talk about prairie dogs, but first, badgers. Excuse me, badgers and weasels. How much have we had to deal with it on? I don't ever remember, at least on our part of the ranch. You growing up on the south side of the river on that other ranch, was there anything that you guys dealt with pertaining to badgers or weasels down there at all?
Well, yeah, there were, the North Ranch where because I was back and
Or
forth
sorry,
between
north.
both
Geez.
sides. Yeah, no, that's all right. North and south of the Muscle Shell. That part of the ranch had more of had Careless Creek running through there, more of a riparian area than we have on the south place because that's all bench grasslands, better grass, better water. Um, I love weasels. They are so freaking cool. But a weasel is classified as a predatory animal.
Right.
They're you know I mean they are voracious killers, but they're eating moles, mice, small stuff. And in the wintertime,
For
we
us,
had
they're
one
more
last winter.
useful.
Oh yeah. Well, and
Unless
and
you have
and we
chickens,
had
I guess. Do they go for
chickens.
chickens?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised what a weasel can do for chickens.
Yeah.
Not good. uh, but in the wintertime they turn white, and then they're called ermine. Really cool, neat animal. The way they move, they're smart, they're fast. They're just like, how in the world does this long thing move like that and be able to survive? But so the weasels aren't really a problem. I would doesn't bother me to have them around so much because they're eating mice. And we've got some feral cats that I allow to live around the place
Right.
because they're perfect. I put cat food out. I want them happy. Keep them there, a few of them, and they are killing mice for fun. I'd love to have a skunk, um, also classified as a predator.
Right.
So, you know, they serve a great purpose. Prairie dogs, completely decimate a pasture or wherever they're at. And I never saw a prairie dog till I was in my 30s. They'd been eradicated,
And
and
that's
now
crazy to me
they're
because
everywhere.
I've grown up with prairie dogs all over, and we
I
just
know.
every time I come home, I see more and more fields. I'm like, oh, that town is getting bigger. It's destroying the ground, turning it into unusable ground because they eat everything around there.
Yeah, and there's been some studies about this, about some of these range ecologists. Like, I was giving Braden a bad time about it, and he agrees. He's like, look, this is stupid. You had this guy at some forum that he had talking about the usefulness of the prairie dog and how it had it eats down everything around its mound as a
Right.
defense and as a food, and so nothing can sneak up on these holes where they have pups down inside. A single hole, they usually don't have multiple hole or multiple entrances. They're just a single one on those. They're not like a gopher, but which is another issue too. Gophers, small prairie dog basically. And he said they talked about how the prairie dogs did such a great job of bringing back grass that was small, fine grass and palatable. And so cows really liked it, and sheep really liked it. So it really did a really good thing. Well, yeah, if it didn't get continually eaten down. And I'm like,
Context.
yeah, context. And I told Braden, I said, yeah, it's a really good thing that we've got prairie dogs on that one southern part of our pasture that we're trying to take care of and fighting with, because if it wasn't for the prairie dog, we'd be standing ass deep in bad grass,
Yeah.
right? I mean, give me a break. And
And what
everybody,
is
this guy
and
got laughed out of the room.
if people don't quite understand what he's talking about, what we mean is the the grass would be left alone and it would be growing to the height where the horses and the cows we'd be using
Eating,
it for production. That's what
and
we'd be using,
it would produce seeds to
right?
replant as a
Yeah.
perennial. As
Because what
long as,
happens, the horses and cows eat it and then they poop it out and then reseed other places. And
or if they don't get it, the wind shakes the
yep,
stalks, reseeds, or a rhizomatous growth through the roots. But anyway, so yeah, prairie dogs are a real issue. Gophers are a real issue. Ground squirrels, they make these mounds that are, you don't really see them that much, but I've seen a bunch of them, especially this last spring. I saw quite a few of them. 13 striped ground squirrels. You just don't see them very often, but yeah, when you ride enough, you see them. Um, so we are continually having a battle with them because they're a danger to especially horses. You don't lope your horse or run them in a lot of spots where they're prairie dogs. Because I have had horses go down into a badger hole that was covered with grass you didn't see, and next thing you know, I'm flipping over in the air and the horse is on its back and didn't land on me, but um, they can break a horse's leg easily,
right.
break livestock's legs. And we do have badgers out there as well.
See,
So
I've never seen a badger, but did you have them on the north side at all, like pretty frequently, or
yeah, oh yeah, you'd have them out there too. And badgers are travelers. They're like a Wolverine light.
okay,
Wolverines in the mountains, but badgers are, uh, yeah, they'll eat your face off. I mean, if you get
yeah,
them mad enough, but they're neat animal. Obviously, I mean, they're great killers. And I think what they're doing on our place is they're finding some prairie dogs, and they big or dig enormous holes, even bigger than a prairie dog. They'll like excavate a prairie dog hole, and so you've got a hole that's a foot and a half across. I mean, it's huge, and
I
they
was gonna
they
say
go
when you
down in
see
there.
a hole for a badger, you know it's a badger.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You try
But
and stay away.
yeah. Well, and I've harvested, call it harvested, a badger one time in the wintertime. Had a winter, because they're a fur bearer. They're not a fur bearer per se, but they're like a rabbit. They grow really good hair in the wintertime, or a coyote, and you can get some money for them. And I don't know, teenage, late teens. Dad and I were traveling down the road and saw a white badger crossing the highway. I'm like,
Oh, that's cool.
whoa, yeah, it was really cool. And I said, let's get him. There's got to be $100 bill right there. And that's in the days when $100 bill went a long way.
Yeah.
So Dad stops and says, where's your pistol? He goes, and we're coming back from Billings, and he goes, oh, yeah, I took it out. I'm like, you got anything in here? No, I don't think so. So, and we're in a car, not even a pickup. And so we open up the trunk, and here's a broken scoop shovel handle.
Oh, jeez.
And so I'm like, that'll do. So I grabbed this, stupid. I mean, it's like this long, literally. And I get this, I chase this badger down, I get him cornered, and he is hissing and he is
Oh, I'm
baring his
sure.
teeth. He's mad. And I'm like, this probably ain't a good idea. So I thump him on the head,
Yeah.
and he kept hissing louder. And I went, ooh, this was a bad idea. And so I,
You better
I,
not stop then.
yeah, but I
You better
didn't
finish the
stop. But
job.
I didn't stop. And that, yeah, I got some money for him, but it was probably not worth it. But
Yeah.
anyway, badgers are out and about. Wolverines right here at the Crazy Mountains west of us is the highest concentration of wolverines in the lower 48 states. Fun
And to
fact.
keep it tied to agriculture to an extent, as a warden, did you ever know anybody that was like maybe Ron that had to help ranchers or farmers over there that had issues with wolverines, or I don't know what
No,
impact they would have on livestock or anything. I'm just curious because
little
I
to
know they're
none.
really feisty. If I saw a wolverine, I would maybe start running because they're pretty angry.
Yeah, no, little to none. They're well, Indians called them devil bear.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just amazing animals. They're kind of neat animals. So, um, sorry, I'm being summoned. What? Oh, the boss is here.
The
I
boss.
think I got something to do. But anyway, you
Okay.
you were going to mention something about well, let me tie this up with the Wolverines. Their range is incredible. I didn't do anything with Wolverines. I think some of the biologists did, more the federal biologists, I think, than anything, because it was something the Fish and Game may have had a part in with one of the guys, like his name was Claire Simmons, great biologist over there in the Big Timber area by the Crazy Mountains, great guy. Long since retired, but they, I know, GPS tracked some of these guys, and their range was unbelievable. They were, in a year or a season, they were tracking some of these guys clear down to New Mexico, Arizona. It's like, I mean, they just move, and they move fast, and they stand up, and they just trot everywhere they're going, and they eat, and then they're off to something else. Like they're hyper, and unbelievably skilled at traveling. So, and they would make their way back and had this GPS track. They were amazed, completely amazed by these animals. But so just kind of wanted to, throw that in there for yay Wolverines. They're you can they're fur bearer. You can take them with a license. Seldom see people do it, because it's just not that easy to do. You were going to mention something about the horses that Cortez. I want to kind of circle back to that. Some of the horses that Cortez brought over, those stallions. Bring that back. Tell us about that as a historian.
Well, so and this may be more legend or whatnot, but it came from a reliable source. My favorite history teacher in junior high and high school, and also wrestling and football coach. He studied like the dude reads like 20 books a year, and they're never like small like little 50 pagers. They're like 300-400 pages, and he knows anything that he's interested in. He knows a lot of, and one of the things that we had to learn back in actually middle school was the initial settlement of colonization of North America, and it brought up, the Spanish conquistadors and whatnot. And one of and to kind of, I think you're referencing how they used the conquistadors, how they used it to intimidate the Aztecs.
Yeah,
And again, whether it's a story from folklore or legend or it's actually accurate, I don't know, but it came from reliable source. And
he's big on sources. He
yeah,
digs in, not just what he's reading, but digs into the sources for that reading. So
yeah,
if Todd Rose, if he says something historical like that, I've got a lot of faith in that he's done his research to verify at least
yeah.
multiple areas if he can. So
And like I
just
said,
credibility is huge with him.
right. And like I said, it may not even be accurate, but the fact that it's a, potential legend that they were thinking this way, it kind of makes sense. But
Mm.
the conquistadors, when they first met the Aztecs, the story goes they had, those stallions and that one mare. Well, they made sure to time the meeting with the Aztecs so that they could first see those horses as they are war horses. They were mounted, so they always made sure that the men riding the horses were on the horse before the Aztecs saw them, because as they saw it, it was a godlike being that was all one creature. And so going forward, a quick fast forward, during conflicts, the horses, they realized they had to put the horses all butt to butt and four and make themselves into like a little cross, because the Aztecs didn't know how to beat these horses, so they would hamstring them, and that's how they disabled them. Well, it was the same thing with the men. They didn't let them get separated because they didn't want it to look like something other than, this one being. Now, that's not to like simplify the Aztecs or anything as these people who are stupid. It's just understanding like there's a horse, there's a new creature that they've never seen before, and how
Right.
it works with humans that didn't make sense to them. So they're trying to see these things on top of metal and firearms and stuff like that. But when they first met the Aztecs, the conquistadors met the Aztecs with these horses, they showed them, and they had the mare upwind. And like I said, they had timed it so that she was in heat. And the legend of the story goes, her being in heat was driving these stallions. The full
Eating
stallions,
stallions.
yes, meaning their whole job is to either kill people because they're a war horse, or to breed a mare. And so she's in heat, and the hormones are flowing from her downwind to them, and it's driving the stallions crazy. And it was used as an intimidation and scare tactic for the Aztecs to be like, listen, you can't control these animals. I don't, you don't want to come close to them because I can't control them. So stay away. Like they will hurt you. They'll kill you. And so that's kind of how it went, is they used some of their stuff, their animals, to continue with not only just the physical intimidation, but then psychological as well.
Psychological intimidation. Yeah. Propaganda, really, in its rawest form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Manipulation. Wow. It wouldn't surprise me at all, because when not just one stallion is tough enough to deal with um, a mare that's got pheromones in the air, but competing stallions,
Right.
that's an issue. When you got a bunch of them like that, I could totally see that. I'd never heard that. That's
Well,
interesting.
and of course, you and I know, and maybe we should try and film and show this a little bit at some point, but uh, the aggression of stallions, they'll bite and strike more probably than any other type of horse. I don't know if I've seen any horse other than a stallion bite and strike as much as they do. It's like
Yeah.
their thing. They just like
Yeah.
to bite and strike like crazy. Whereas other horses, they'll just flip their hind end around and they'll kick you, or they'll push you. Those are really those are the four aggressive parts: bite, strike, kick, and push. And stallions are, whatever reason, they want to bite and strike constantly, and I just don't understand. But hey,
Well, that's how they herd, and that behavior when they drop their head just and their nose just above the ground, and they move it back and forth, that snaking and herd mares around, but they're aggressive doing it. It's just pure intimidation to
yeah,
to uh, make a herd do what he wants them to do.
right,
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that's really cool about bringing that all the way back to the horses, but tolerance with horses, tolerance with deer, antelope, moose, elk. We have them there, but not in huge numbers. We got more antelope than anything else, prairie dogs. But we do get the occasional moose through there. Had one that kind of parked in our windbreak for about a week and a half.
yeah,
Left him alone. Just a young bull. A young bullwinkle was kind of lost. He went down the Yellowstone or the Muscle Shell River and jumped over the ridge there, and he was just hanging out. And then just moved on. We've had some bear in there a couple times, not very often, but usually they're all younger stuff that's been kicked away from a female, particularly the bears. They get kicked off the sow at 2, and they got to go make their own living. So they get pushed around, and they just go for a walkabout, I guess, and end up kind of down there on the flats where we're at.
yeah. And I think to wrap it up, the thing that we probably do, we want to propose, I guess not really propose, but to show and explain them to those who are going to see this. It's not just about, like you've said, coexisting and living together, but it's also, we look at wildlife as, yeah, they can be a nuisance at times too, at times, but they're also, we see them, they're very cool. We like to see them around, like, oh hey, it's the deer, it's the Hungarian partridges, whatever we
Yeah.
see, the
A lot of
the,
birds.
yeah, and the pheasants, because we like seeing some of those roosters. They're really pretty. But then it's management of the ground as well, and we try and look at it from, okay, how do we maximize the ground usage for livestock while also competing with the uh, wildlife, while also taking care of the ground, because again, the ground takes care of you, you take care of the ground, and it's a never ending cycle. And so there's just that trick and that artful science, I guess, of trying to manage everything as best as you can while also coexisting with those animals.
Well, and I think there's, for instance, a sharp-tailed grouse lek where they're dancing and they put their feathers out, their heads come down, and they stand up and they stomp their feet really fast. When I see that, I think about how the Plains Indian in their dances emulated those sharp-tailed grouse birds. That's where they got some of these dances from. And
That's kind of
I mean,
cool.
there's some real cultural tiebacks to that that are kind of neat. You don't want to. I hate to see those go away
Yeah.
or get lost. So I mean, just kind of for me as a, I'm here at this time in history on this piece of ground where there's people well before us whites showed up here that were watching these same birds do the same thing, and they thought they were neat enough that they were, emulating them in some of their cultural dance. So kind of a
Right.
cool thing.
Well, with that, I think we're going to wrap it up this week, and I'm going to sign us off. So thanks everybody for joining us on this episode, and thank you till you're better paid.